Good evening. Tonight we hope to provide you with an overview of the process for students with IEPs or 504 plans as they prepare to transition to college. We realize this can be an overwhelming process, so we're hoping that by providing you with an outline, by familiarizing you with some terminology, that will give you a place to start. Particularly if you have underclassmen, you will walk away this evening certainly with questions still about the college search process and the college application process. This presentation is not going to get into those real fine details about that, but we do have lots of programming that will walk you through the college search and college application process if there are any parents in the room of younger students. In the fall of junior and senior year for both students and parents, we certainly have programming that will support you in that process as well. So if you walk away with questions still tonight, don't feel like you've missed something. Also, we want to acknowledge that there will be students who are focusing on a plan other than college or who later decide on something other than college. This presentation is geared towards preparing for college. However, the case manager and your child's counselor are ready to talk to your student about alternate plans like gap years, employment, military, technical school as well. So just keep that in mind, and if that becomes relevant for your student, have them reach out to their counselor or their case manager so that we can support them through that process as well. We will take a brief Q&A at the end. We ask that for confidentiality reasons, you keep those questions very general. If you find that you have questions that are really specific to your student or your family, definitely reach out to your child's counselor or case manager so that we can work with you on addressing those questions. So we have Ms. Cotto here, who is case manager from the child study team at Ridge, and she is going to start us this evening.
First, we just want to give you an overview of the law that dictates how things often work at the elementary, middle school, high school level, as well as at the college level. So there's actually two laws, the IDEA and the ADA. The IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And this is the law that protects the rights of students with disabilities by ensuring that everyone receives a free and appropriate public education regardless of ability. It requires kindergarten through 12th grade districts to provide specialized services and instruction to students who qualify. The ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, protects students from being discriminated against in the kindergarten through 12th grade setting due to a recognized or perceived disability. Section 504 and the ADA, which apply to post-secondary education, are very different from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, which covers grades K through 12. This means that some adjustment of the perspective of students, parents, and instructors is necessary when making the transition from high school to college. We hope that providing you with this information and knowing the differences will help the student prepare for their future. For example, in high school, if a student has an IEP, the staff will schedule an annual meeting. They'll collect the information and feedback from the teachers. We'll review the student's progress and program and plan for the next year. In college, the student now needs to take the initiative to communicate, to advocate, to talk with their professors, talk with the staff at the College Supportive Services regarding what they need and how that will come about. For example, a student at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut is approved for, let's say a student's approved for accommodations to have a test read aloud or extended time, or maybe a test in a quiet environment. That student would need to submit a request to that department to schedule it with the appropriate college personnel in advance. So once again, we want to talk tonight a lot about the importance of those advocacy skills, the importance of making sure how they know the next system which is college or wherever you go, works. So K through 12 students with disabilities are covered by one of two laws. Under IDEA, which is the Individualized Education Plans, IEPs are developed for students with learning disabilities. Under ADA, students with chronic health issues and physical impairments typically receive a 504 plan. In college, students with learning disabilities, chronic medical conditions, and physical impairments are protected under ADA. Colleges are not subject to the IDEA. IEPs and 504 plans do not automatically carry over. The law provides less stringent requirements for colleges than it does for high school. If a student qualifies for services at the college level, the college will develop the plan. As you explore college options, we encourage you to gather information regarding each college's eligibility process, the types of accommodations they might offer, and services that are available. It can be unsettling for some students and families when they initially start to learn about some of these differences, both in the law and what is required of colleges. But as we progress through this presentation, we hope you will walk away feeling empowered, understanding what the rights of the student are and what you can expect. We want you to know what information to explore and what questions to ask. It's easy to become overwhelmed by change, but in essence, there are a great many colleges that provide wonderful supportive programs to students, and we've had many students have wonderful successes. So finding that overall appropriate fit for a student is the focus of this process. In addition, students are encouraged to also seek support at college that anyone in college could access. Meeting with a professor during their office hours, attending a math lab, signing up to go to a writing lab, or joining a study group. So as much as we're going to focus on what's available for supportive services, we also want to make sure our students access services for all. For example, if a student finds that the library at college is too distracting, they might find a quiet, empty classroom to study in. Turn off their cell phone, check it only briefly or periodically. So to be successful, all of the students need self-discipline, resourcefulness, resiliency, and making academic responsibilities a priority to apply, and this applies to all students. We really want them to make their academic responsibilities the biggest priority. In this presentation, we will offer contrasts regarding what colleges may or may not provide, especially compared to your high school experience. How ADA works in college. The presence of a disability does not guarantee services, and that's important to know. Colleges are not responsible for identifying students with disabilities. The student is responsible to self-identify. So we just want to make sure students walk out knowing that they have to reach out to the college and identify themselves and advocate for services. ADA only requires colleges to provide students with access to programs. Colleges are not required to provide specialized education or enough accommodations to make students as successful as their peers. In essence, this means that colleges are not required to level the playing field for a student with disabilities. Again, this does not mean that students cannot receive support for their disabilities. It does mean that if a student needs support in college, this is a feature which will factor into their college search process. At the right college, students with a variety of strengths and needs can be accommodated. It's about finding that good fit. Another resource we want you to be aware of, it's a website, and the website is www.fairtest.org. And it lists colleges that also allow you to apply through an alternative route without using an ACT or an SAT scores. Some of my students aren't great test takers, and they often get discouraged. I had one example was I had a student who took the ACT, did the best he could, And then when it came to senior year, he applied to 3 colleges with his ACT score, and he applied to 3 colleges through this www.fairtest.org without having to submit an ACT score. So it's good for our students to know that those options are available. That's a really wonderful resource. So now we talk about colleges and the types of college programs that offer support. There's 3 relatively large, broad categories. Structured, colleges that offer a very structured, most comprehensive support. Colleges that offer coordinated or less comprehensive, and then colleges that offer services. That would be the least comprehensive. The above 3 categories are very broad, and within each of these categories, there is truly a spectrum and range of services and supports. Please note that physical disability is a protected class under ADA, and schools must address limitations related to those needs. We had a student years ago who needed to have a sign language interpreter. And as he was exploring several colleges, he explored colleges and he was looking at size and location and majors and tuition and other costs. And he also asked the school, how would they handle the fact that he needed to have a sign language interpreter? And one school responded, oh, when you get here, we'll figure it out. And that was very unsettling. So he chose a school that said, listen, we've done this before. We have a plan in place. We have a list of interpreters, and we have helpful resources. So once again, the colleges have to provide it. It might be just about the student's comfort level and figuring out what another student might be okay with forging the way at a college that's never maybe had to do that before. But for my student, he wanted to go to his college that already had the experience and could reassure him that his needs would be met. Structured programs. So now we're going to break down these 3 categories and talk to them in a little bit more detail. Structured programs, colleges that have structured programs, it's the most comprehensive service. Typically, their department has staff that are certified in learning disabilities and special services. Staff and student are involved in structured plans to meet their learning needs. They might have a contract that you sign up for, that you participate and discuss shared responsibilities. They'll develop a specific skill or remedial course required. A separate application to the program may be required. Additional fees for services may be required. This is often most appropriate for students who require a significant amount of accommodations or modifications in high school. As you consider these supportive programs, consider your child's current services and supports to help determine if this is an appropriate fit. And keep in mind that may change throughout the years. As a middle schooler or as a freshman, they may be needing a lot of services, and maybe as they progress through, they start to use less. Or we have students who start to need more. It can vary. Landmark in Vermont and Beacon in Florida are 2 very unique examples of very specialized schools that only accept students with IEPs. That's probably at the highest tier of structured programs. As you explore colleges, we encourage you to seek further information from websites regarding their supportive services. The next are colleges that offer coordinated services. Services are less comprehensive than a structured program. Specific skill courses or remedial courses may be available. Common accommodations are available, such as extended time. Appropriate for students who have received some modifications or accommodations in high school on an as-needed basis. Then the last category is kind of more the colleges that offer basic services. These would be the least comprehensive category of programming. They do comply with federal mandate to provide reasonable accommodations to all students who are found eligible. They're most appropriate for students who require the minimum amount of accommodations in high school, but would feel comfortable in knowing that they are there. Colleges are required to provide some services to students with disabilities. Students applying to these programs will need to advocate for themselves perhaps more strongly than the other types of programs. So it's important as you go through knowing some of this terminology, and then as you look on their website or as you talk to them, find out what the range and level of services may be available. And once again, what the best fit is for your student. I will now pass along back to Ms. Capozzi.
The college search process for all students really begins with self-assessment. All students must reflect on the characteristics that they are looking for in a college. They examine things like their personality. Are they very social? Are they more introverted? Are they looking for a very social campus or perhaps more of a service-driven campus? What geographic location are they looking for? Is there a particular major that's playing a role in their search? So the college search process for a student with a learning disability is really a blending of that need for support, their learning needs, with these other goodness of fit criteria. So the Learning Disability Support Program is one component of the overall fit for that student. In terms of program selection, the student really needs to start by evaluating their specific needs. The student needs to understand his or her academic, social, emotional, and/or medical needs. They need to be able to explain their disability in plain language is the essence of what we're getting at. They also need to understand how their disability impacts their ability to learn and any other areas in their life that might be impacted by their disability. It's important that they reflect on the accommodations they're currently utilizing to be successful, as well as what accommodations and supports they might have needed in the past. We know that students with a clear understanding of their needs are more likely to choose colleges with appropriately matching supports. It's also important that you and your student understand the different levels of support programs and identify which is most appropriate. So we're talking about the differences between structured, coordinated, and just general services. Not all programs are created equal. For instance, simply having the label of a structured program does not imply excellence. You could have a structured program that was perhaps not performing, not functioning very well, that might not be a better fit than a very robust, very experienced, coordinated program. So really, the point here is that you and your student need to be collaborating with the counselor and the case manager so that we can assist you in identifying specific programs, not just a category of program, but specific programs that might be a good fit for your student, so that you can then begin the process of researching them further, getting out and visiting so that you can see for yourself what are some of the differences that we're talking about. When you are visiting, it's really important that you meet with representatives from the Office of Disability Services, and that you come armed with questions, some questions that you might want to ask. How many staff members are there, and what is their training in? We would expect that in structured programs especially, that you would find dedicated and specially trained staff that have training in providing learning disability support services and special education. What are the main roles of the Office of Disability staff? Is this their primary focus, or are they devoted to other offices as well? What types of accommodations are provided through this office? Hopefully, what you find out is that those that are typically provided are congruent with some of the accommodations that your child is using to be successful in high school. If they aren't, that might be cause for concern about your child applying to that particular program. Are there any fees associated with utilizing these services? Particularly in structured programs, you might expect to find a separate fee assessed for utilizing those learning disability support programs. How many students receive services through this office? One indicator of how robust a program they have. At a very large school, you'd hope to find more than 10 students utilizing the office, right? You want to see that it's a healthy program that students are taking advantage of. Do you provide information about the graduation rate and freshman retention rate for students served by this office? Indicators of how well this program is functioning and how successful those students are. Freshman retention rate, meaning those students are finding success, they're happy, they're returning for a second year. Graduation rate being how long does it take for them to get out with their degree? 4 or 5 years is pretty standard. So if students out of this office are taking more than that, that's something that you probably want to know about. It's also important that you examine the broad academic support resources at the colleges of interest. Things such as writing centers, tutoring services, study skills resources that are available to all students. This will vary greatly among colleges. And logic kind of serves to reason that a school that has general support services that are pretty comprehensive will probably have learning disability support program that mimics that. Not necessarily, but in general. So we provided you here with some examples of colleges with structured and coordinated programs. The purpose of this only is to illustrate that schools that have quality learning disability support programs come in all different shapes and sizes and geographic locations. This is not an exhaustive list. It's also not an endorsement of any particular program. It's merely just to provide you with some examples. The application process, we're talking specifically about the application for the disability support program, really varies by college. So your student, as they're moving through this process, is going to spend a lot of time referring to the Office of Disability Support website at each of the schools that you are considering, because each program is going to have unique requirements, deadlines, and process. You can also get this information when you're doing those campus visits. Students will submit a regular application to the college, and in some cases, a separate application to the Learning Disability Support Program. This will almost always be the case for a structured program, and then some schools will have applications to the coordinated programs as well, or the services level programs. Deadlines will vary based on the school and type of program. I would say generally, applications for structured programs typically occur at the time of application, though that's not a hard rule, but they usually occur at the time of application, whereas if an application is required for coordinated or services, that probably will occur after the application for admission. Disclosure is one of those kind of hot button topics. So when we say disclosure, we're talking about the student informing the admissions office that they have a disability of some sort. Students can decide to disclose their disability during any part of the admissions process or after acceptance, or decide not to disclose at all. This is a decision that they are able to make. Students applying to structured programs will likely disclose during the application process because a separate application is often required, thereby performing disclosure. Students should discuss this topic with their counselor and their case manager during the college process so that we can talk to you about your concerns, we can talk to you about how you might go about disclosing if that's what your decision is, and we can talk to you about the potential impact as we see it of disclosing or not disclosing your disability. Schools cannot deny admission to students solely because they've disclosed a disability. However, colleges are not required to alter their admission requirements for students with disabilities. This means that the student must be admissible to the school. the admission requirements won't be altered purely because they have a learning disability. Students may be denied admission upon disclosing a disability if the services they will require are more significant than those the school can provide. I will give you a hypothetical example to kind of tie that together. Let's say we have a senior student who in high school is utilizing a significant amount of supportive services and accommodations to be successful. If that student were to apply to a school that offered only that services category, not a comprehensive program, if that student disclosed their disability during the admissions process, they might be denied at that school. And though it is a difficult truth, the reality is we don't want that student to be admitted to that school. That school is not prepared to support what that student needs to be successful. We want our students to arrive at college and find success. We want them to be competent, and we want them to feel accomplishment. And that's going to be very difficult for a student who needs learning disability support, who is applying to a school that is not prepared to supply that. It's not good for the student, and it's not good for the college either. So that's kind of the rub on that disclosure element, in that if the student is choosing a school that's really not appropriate for them, given what they're currently utilizing in high school, they might be denied there. So now we're moving beyond the college search and application process, and we're talking now at this phase of self-identification and documentation. We're talking about a student now who's been admitted and is planning to arrive on a campus in the fall. So students must identify themselves to the appropriate office once they are admitted, once they arrive on campus. Students must provide the required documentation. Now, this will be provided to high school students upon graduation, updated transition testing if they're a student with an IEP, copy of their IEP or their 504 plan if that's the relevant plan for that student. So we will provide that to them when they graduate. Students who do not request services, even despite obvious impairments, will not receive services. Colleges are not obligated to provide services to students who do not self-identify. So it's really important that we be working with your student and that you be working with your student at home on these self-advocacy skills now so that they get practice and that they feel comfortable in college talking to adults about their needs, because it's going to be their job. So in terms of required documentation, proof of disability will be required. This is going to vary based on the disability and really the school, but typically a high school 504 plan, medical documentation, an IEP, updated testing, transition testing for students with IEPs usually occurs during junior year. These requirements that are specific to each school will certainly be found on the website for disability services of that school. And the law does allow colleges to determine what documentation and eligibility requirements are for receiving services. If a student is found eligible, some accommodations may include extended time, which is generally 50% for in-class tests, access to audiobooks, access to texts in alternate formats, tutoring, note-taking, a change in testing environment, large group versus small group. These are the accommodations that are typically not available. Study guides, 100% extended time, alternative format exams, so for instance, take-home, essay versus multiple choice, oral exams, projects instead of papers. And the reason for this is really because that would represent a significant modification to the curriculum, and that's not likely to happen in most cases in the college setting. Also, typically not available, extended time to complete papers and assignments. Colleges do not have to waive curriculum requirements. Now, if this is the first time you are learning about what may not be available to your student, it's a very negative perspective that we have to come from on this slide. But what we want you to know is you shouldn't panic. The reason we spend so much time talking about honest self-assessment and that reflective piece and selecting programs that are a good fit is because at the right school for your student, with the right learning disability support program that matches your students' needs, by and large, students will find the tools and supports they need to be successful. This is repeated for us every year. It's hard work and finding the right program, but there's support for your child and for your family through this, and that's where we want you to focus on, and not on what they won't be getting, but what they will be getting at the right place. So in terms of accessing services, once the student is approved for services, they've been found eligible, it is often the student's responsibility to notify their professors that they're working with the Office of Disability Support, that they have developed a plan. These are the types of accommodations they've been approved to receive. In the beginning, in a structured or a more comprehensive program, support staff is usually helping students at least with some kind of script or role play to have those conversations, but that's where that self-advocacy piece is really going to come in. The focus at college is on encouraging self-advocacy, encouraging independent learning, developing compensatory strategies, and using assistive technologies to their full advantage. Colleges may not offer some of the accommodations students have been accustomed to in high school. Support is available to students, though, to help them develop strategies to make up for these differences in accommodations. So we want you to be armed with some next steps and some things to think further about. I hope that the need for student self-assessment has become clear. Students take an inventory of their needs, of the accommodations that they're using, other considerations that will be important to them in terms of fit of a school. It's important for all students and students with learning disabilities as well to visit schools, see a variety of schools, see a variety of types of programs, develop a list of questions. We've provided you with some. And be sure that you keep notes documenting and highlighting the pros and cons of what you're learning at each of these schools or at these different programs. And lastly, get support. Your child's school counselor and case manager, while this might be your first or second time going through this process, it's not hers. They've done it, we've done it a lot. So we're here to support you and to guide you through this process and answer questions as they come up. So in closing, as for any student, the college search process is really about a best fit. Disability support is one component of that fit. And this is going to be an ongoing conversation between your family, your student, and the child's counselor or case manager. Even at colleges with highly structured programs, it's really important to remember that the student is still first and foremost a student of that college, not of that disability support program. So that applies both to the admissions process, but also to the student being able to visualize themselves on the campus at large, not just in this one program that the school might offer. The student is the best person able to determine what level of support is needed and what type of program really suits them. It's really important that the student drive this process. We are all here to support them and guide them, but they really need to be the ones that are leading the way. So we will now have a brief Q&A. Again, please keep these to be general questions, but we are happy to take questions at this time. Can I put the last slide up? Is that what you said?
The slide with the list of colleges?
Oh yes, and this presentation is going to be posted on the counseling department website as well. This is not an exhaustive list, as we said.
That one? Is that? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, this is a very brief list. There's many, many more schools.
Yes.
The public school
He asked if can you hear that? The public schools and the state schools, are they generally more than one category than the other?
No, I wouldn't say that that's a very clear-cut assessment. I would say they're probably not structured by and large, probably ranging more in the coordinated services, but it's fluid. It's not cut and dry. I wouldn't classify because a school was a public school or a larger state institution that they couldn't provide good learning disability support. I don't think that would be a fair assessment.
Do you have a question? Oh, www.fairtest. Yeah, so www.fairtest.org gives students an alternative way to apply without using an ACT or SAT score. I think it's a list of about 1,000 colleges.
Yeah, Fair Test is a list of schools who have agreed as part of their admission requirements not to require standardized testing. So it's a searchable list. It's a database of, about 1,000 schools.
So if appropriate, we would still encourage a student to consider taking an ACT or SAT to keep their options open, because they might find a school that's part of the requirement, but it's really nice to know that this is another alternative for them. Yes.
And I'm curious if you have any practical advice for those of us who are trying to launch them into the world of self-advocacy. Because while it's great to sit here and say we have to teach our children how to be self-advocates, it doesn't happen often as a practical reality. And I am trying personally very hard with my child to get him to do these things. But honest to God, it's like pulling teeth. So if you could maybe throw me a bone, I'd really appreciate it.
Hey, being a parent is not for the weak of heart. It's really.
How do you get them to the next level where they're going to be the ones who
Yeah.
go to the Office of Special Services or Disability Services and say, hey, Dr. Smith, I need extra time on this test. How do you do that?
I think you have to start small. And it's interesting, I just got an email today from a parent of a student that's a junior. And I was going to email back that was a request to apply for a summer program. By the way, there's summer programs out there that we want to tell you about. And I was going to email back, I haven't yet. I was going to say, hey, is this something we could ask your student to do? She has to ask for a letter of recommendation. So why don't together one of us sit down and help her write the email asking, hey, I'm interested in this summer program that offers exposure to learning disability services at the college level. I need a reference. So I think you have to start really super small. I think you can't do it alone. Maybe a teacher or a counselor or a case manager or somebody at the school can help you. But just finding little ways that they can, and also just talking about it. Just, talking about it and maybe giving some examples of ways that you've had to advocate for something in your life and how that worked. A lot of students, probably when we were growing up, they don't know how the world works. And they're still figuring that out and learning how the world works. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to say here is let's give them more information to talk about how the world works and what's out there and how you can advocate. But we agree, it's not easy. And with your unique student, we would definitely encourage you, go back to talk to the counselor or the case manager or whoever, the teachers, and see if you could join together to find little ways that maybe they can begin to take that risk and advocate or reach out. Because it's not easy. I think we didn't mention, there are some schools that have summer programs where you can go for a week, 2 weeks. Sometimes they have day programs. I know schools like Curry, Mitchell, Fairleigh Dickinson, where if you could go on their website and search for their summer programs, and then see what their summer experience is for students with learning disabilities that they could maybe do after sophomore year or after junior year or even after senior year. So they get their foot in the door before they go off to in the fall. But I agree, it's not easy. It's not easy. And they don't want to stand out. They don't want to be different. They want to lay low, right? It's not easy.
Might sound silly. I find a lot of it is shyness. Yeah. And like, for example, my daughter, I don't need the mic.
Okay, you're good. Okay.
My daughter is very shy and is embarrassed, so she won't ask adults or questions. She won't talk, and I think that's a big part of them going and asking for help. They have a little confidence. So we've been to 4 colleges where we went and talked to actual cheer coaches and stuff in addition to the college part. And the first 3 colleges, I sat there doing all the talking. And I finally said that before we walked in the 4th one, you either talk or nothing will be said. And I threw her to the wolves. And I didn't say a word, and we sat there for 3 minutes in silence, and then she realized, oh crap. And she started to talk, and when we walked out of there, she was like, that was the first time I've ever talked like that. And I was like, well,
You did
it
it.
was awful, because I felt bad, because I did throw her to the wolves. And it was
Yeah.
something that she was interested in, so because there was, an impact on her,
Yeah.
how that conversation went, it worked. I think they just need to have to feel that impact.
Yeah. No, I think that's also just sharing mutual stories of what works, what doesn't work. Yeah, yeah, and also kind of help stepping back as an adult and kind of letting them. And yeah, it's right, 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 and they're yeah. But you bring up an interesting point. One of the colleges will say, if your kid is at college and gets stuck in an elevator, guess who they're going to call? You. Right, they're going to call you. They shouldn't call you. They should call the number on the elevator, but they're going to call you. So, they do say that kids nowadays are, not putting themselves out there as much. Oh, you had a question? Okay, did anybody else? Yes. Do community colleges offer supports for students?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Both Raritan Valley Community College, which would be for Somerset County, and Morris County Community College both have pretty well-developed learning disability support programs. As I would expect in other institutions, it will vary among community college, but that's certainly a service that I would expect to find on campus there and does exist at RV and Morris County.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen an increase in students applying to local community colleges for either financial reasons or because they don't want to be far away from home or because they're not sure where they want to go. And we've had some very great success stories where they're there for a year or two and then maybe transfer to a 4-year school.
Thank you. Yes. If a child's accepted to a college and they're going there and they want to take a summer class at a community college, can they get services for taking one class at a community college?
So a couple of concerns in that instance. So the first thing that the student would want to just be aware of that actually has nothing to do with your question is that based on their admission to that school, that they're permitted to take that course. So assuming that that's fine and doesn't impact their admission in terms of transfer, probably not, but maybe. It's really going to vary depending on if that college is going to view that student as matriculated yet at the time that they're taking the class. So that's a really gray area, and it's probably really good question to ask of through an email or when you're visiting, because it's just going to vary significantly.
Two thoughts. One, you probably have to apply to their services. So, you probably would have to go through the process of applying for the services at that particular college. The other thought I had that kids are coming back and telling me, it's always fun when a lot of students come back to talk to us, is don't forget, if you have to take those entrance exams, maybe a reading, English, or a math, if you know ahead of time that you're going to have to take that exam, you can apply to get extended time on that exam. So sometimes, I even got a call from RVCC a couple years ago, and the coordinator said, don't forget to remind your students, if they're taking the placement exams at RVCC or any college and they truly need extended time, make sure they make them aware and advocate for that. So it is helpful. Also, some of my students who've been coming back have been saying, sometimes you can advocate for priority registration. They don't all grant that, but students are saying that we should spread the word that sometimes you can ask for priority registration based on maybe what's important in your schedule and what your needs are.
This talk is extremely useful, but I was wondering whether our kids should be here, because they should know it's like a wake-up call that whatever they get here will not be given in the college. So they should hear what you're telling us, and they should be here to listen to this, that they should advocate for themselves. And I don't know how, are you going to talk to them individually on this? Because this is super important that they should know.
Yep. Well, counselors meet with all students in their junior year individually to talk about the college search process and the college application process. So that's part of the conversation for students. We don't consider this a separate entity. For a student who has a learning disability, this is part of my conversation with them when we're talking about college planning. And then during the annual review as well. But I appreciate that feedback. They're certainly not excluded from a presentation ever. So they're always welcome at an evening presentation. Well, also, this presentation is going to be, the PowerPoint is going to be posted, so it sounds like maybe that would be a good opportunity for further conversation at home also, to be reinforced at school and at home.
My child is in 10th grade. I'll bring him back next year.
Yeah.
If you're 11, it's probably...
Yeah. That's a good point. If you have a 9th grader, a 10th grader, 11th grader, next year come back and bring them with you. And I've been at presentations and students have a lot to offer.
I just have two questions. One, those terms, structured coordinated services, are like standard, right? So like if I go home to Google for structured college programs, are they standard?
Not,
Well, they're not unique to Ridge. Would I go as far to say is they're standard? No, probably not. I think they're more descriptive than they are a label that you'd find on Marist. So what are the indicators that might help you place a program? A separate application, an application fee, an application that is entirely separate. Oh, I said application. So an application fee, and in conversation with the learning disability support program, some of the other indicators, trained staff that are, like really specific, you can also just ask them, like, what type of program is this that you have? It's not that these terms wouldn't be understandable. I just don't think you're going to go on to an admissions website and find that it says, we offer a structured learning disability support program. What you'll find from a Google search is probably a top 15 or a top 20, whoever is performing the rating, top 20 best schools for students with learning disability support. You will not yield, here are the 50 structured programs. A good book that you could pick up would be the K&W guide. That will classify schools very distinctly for you.
It's,
It's a college guide. It is only about learning disability support programs.
but she brings up a good point. You know, in the state of New Jersey, we have a lot of common language with high school, like, you know, if you have an IEP, everybody, if you in Rich High School or Bernard's High School, it's called an IEP. It brings up a good point. Every college tends to have their own terminology, and it is a little bit harder to figure out. Like in Arizona, their program's called the SALT program. At Fairleigh Dickinson, program's called the Regional Center. And I'm trying to think of what some of the other ones. So each school tends to have a name to their unique program. So you do have to do some digging to kind of find out what it is.
So there's IEP, there's 504, and then a child could also just have an accommodation, which would or would not fall under the 504.
At Ridge High School, students would have an IEP if they're classified, if they have a learning disability or other health impairment, or they would have a 504 plan, usually, but not exclusively for some medical-based condition, or they could have an action plan, which would be a more informal than a 504 plan, and they could receive accommodations through an action plan. But typically, if a student is receiving an accommodation, it'd be at Ridge High School at least, through one of those three things.
If, for example, if your student has a medical diagnosis of something like ADD or ADHD or some kind of chronic condition, usually when you submit that application, it has to be within a year. So whether it's your pediatrician or your neurologist or your specialist, you want to make sure that it's dated within less than a year on their letterhead that they have this diagnosis and this is what they're recommending. You can actually encourage them to write what they've been using and what you're continuing to advocate for. But usually with medical documentation, it has to be within a year. Usually with our transition testing, we do it junior year because the colleges want your student to be 16 or older, and they want it more current. So we usually do that junior year.
Hi. What if your student is going into the vocational program, so he'll be in school until he's 21? Do you still meet with the counselor when they're in 11th grade, or how does that work?
We do have another evening that we offer for students who are with us till they're 21. So I don't know, you could definitely talk to your case manager. But do you have any thought? It would depend, it would maybe possibly depend upon the end goal for the student. You know, what's the plan for the student? And then we would definitely offer whatever meetings would be necessary.
Yeah, I would say that that's really individual to the student and probably a collaboration based on the case manager, the counselor, and yet the student's goals and the the students and the parent concerns also. So I think it's really individual, but it's certainly a collaboration. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Afterwards, if you see me, I'll give you some other information. I'm impressed how participatory and active you are as an audience. You've made it very enjoyable. We want to thank everybody. Does anybody else have any other questions or concerns, or anybody have any ideas how we could make it more student-friendly? Let us know. We'd be more than happy to have more students come. Keep in mind, maybe as your student goes on their journey, maybe they might want to think about coming back and volunteering and be a part of our presentation, and can actually talk about their unique experience. if they felt comfortable. We do appreciate when the students come back and tell us what's working, what's not working. It's very beneficial.
All right. Have a good evening. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming out.